Hey there, Patrick Brewer here, Zero Emission Vehicle Fleets Advisor for the Clean BC Go Electric Fleets program. Today's presenter is Randall Kaufman from Black & Veatch. They're an engineering firm that has done a lot in the fleet electrification space. Very interesting presentation, very forward-looking. I think you'll enjoy it. Here's Randall.
Hello, I'm Randall Kaufman with Black & Veatch, and welcome to my presentation about fossil-free resilient energy for zero-emission transportation fueling and critical facility power. A little bit about Black & Veatch. We're an engineering, procurement, construction company, been around for over 100 years. And our focus is on human critical infrastructure, such as water, power, telecommunications, oil and gas, renewable energy, and zero-emission transportation fueling infrastructure. If you haven't already, I encourage you to check out our ebook series, specifically regarding fleet electrification. And we have some other very valuable resources at our website, www.bv.com. So to get started with zero emission, the first thing is planning. So assessing what your needs are for your fleet. How many vehicles do you have? How many do you intend to have? What kind of routes? What kind of infrastructure you need to supply the fuel for them? So if you have electric vehicles with a certain delivery route, then you would consider the infrastructure for charging as such. So after you do your planning, that's when you start developing your site with some engineering. You provide your permit drawings, get approved with all the local jurisdictions to ensure you meet the local codes, local zoning, any other special circumstances. You want to realize those at the beginning of your project, not halfway through. A good rule of thumb is it's much less expensive to do the changes before construction. Once you're into construction, it's very expensive both in time and money. And then after you do your engineering, you go to construction, working with your utilities to make sure you get the right utility power when you need it, do your commissioning of your equipment, and then finally your operation and maintenance. So in considering your deployment of zero emission transportation, it's also important to consider other things around it, like your facility. What do you need for your facility power? What kinds of vehicles do you have? Multiple different fuels. You might be phasing out if you have natural gas vehicles today, and you may want to go to hydrogen in the future or have some electric. So there's a variety of different opportunities for different low emission fuels depending on your use case. So with this in mind, we developed this energy station concept. And essentially what we're looking at is planning and implementing whatever fueling needs you have for low carbon and low emission fueling in a cost effective manner over time, but also considering the facility power. What kind of facility do you have? What kind of resiliency requirements do you have for your power? And then how do you do this in an economically viable fashion? How do you do it in the right time frame that you need when you're getting vehicles, when you're expanding your facility? How do you pay for it? What's the best way? There's a variety of different business models available between the utility programs, any government grants, subsidies, there's private financing. So are you going to have fueling as a service or energy as a service or some part of that? Considering things like hydrogen in the longer term. What's the value stack of hydrogen from on-site generation, use as a fuel, use to create electricity on site that's resilient? And also, what's the ecosystem? How many other organizations are in your region that also would benefit from the use of hydrogen? And what's the opportunity to share resources to achieve common goals? So that's the energy station concept. So I've mentioned already, think about the scale. When do you have the assets coming online, and when do you need your infrastructure? So from proper planning, you can start with the pilot or your initial deployment of chargers. Maybe you just need some level 2 chargers initially for a few vehicles that have relatively small batteries or they have long dwell time. Maybe you have enough electricity available on your current system to put in a couple level 2 chargers to at least get those assets operational, testing the vehicles, testing the software for energy management, charge management, And then the lessons learned can be used to plan for the next stage of deployment when you have more vehicles coming. And then finally, you could do that in building blocks to the ultimate goal of building out your facility or your fleet. It could be multiple facilities. So along the way, taking the lessons learned, understanding what the implications are, understanding the assets, and then plan accordingly. From an energy, and as I mentioned, starting with what you have and what you need. So in the case here on this slide, I'm showing you that you might deploy some initial electric vehicle charging, but if you have natural gas vehicles and you have natural gas service on site, those are great starting points for your plan to decarbonization. Taking it to the next level, how can you further reduce your emissions and increase your resiliency and your availability of your fleet? So with natural gas, you can use a directed biogas and get a biogas contract. That's a very fast and easy way to reduce the carbon and reduce your emissions from your natural gas fleet while still keeping them in operation until you have a replacement. Same thing with electric. Once you use your available power for your electrification of fleets, how can you expand your electrification? In this case, simply adding energy management software, charge management software, understanding how long your vehicle is stationary, how much time you have to charge. You can maximize the current infrastructure you have while you plan for the expansion. Very important to start talking with the utility early. Once you have an idea of how many electric vehicles you're going to have over time, it's important to get with the utility and start planning. Chances are you're not the only ones in that area that need more utility power. So the earlier you contact your utility, the better planning they can do to bring the amount of power in the future you might need. So after using what you have existing, the next step would start adding capacity, adding your infrastructure. So what can you do? What's your resiliency requirement? So one thing you can do is just look at the site. Have you already considered solar power? Wouldn't that be amazing to fuel your vehicles from the power of the sun simply by you taking advantage of solar during the day, either direct fueling from the vehicle or storing it in a battery for use later in conjunction with the grid to maximize the economics. This could also be used for your facility. If you have a large warehouse with a lot of roof space, it's a great place to put solar, again, for fueling the vehicles and also offsetting your utility power you're using at the building. The other thing is stationary energy storage. How can you use batteries on site, stationary batteries, to provide the resiliency, to provide energy storage so that you have energy when you need it? There's also potential economic benefits from the energy. Depending on your utility rates, you might be able to use the energy storage to use electrons, the lowest cost electron at the time you need it. If it's a time of peak period from utilities, it might make sense to take that energy out of the batteries until the time of use rates are more favorable for economic fueling of your vehicles. There's also other technologies like vehicle to grid or V2X, where you can use electrons from other stationary vehicles that may not be in service. You can use those as energy storage as well, both for offsetting the utility costs, but also in times of if there's a utility outage or, again, the whole idea about resiliency. What vehicles you need available and what power you need at your facility available. So the other thing on the gas side is a nice way to be able to expand your electricity on site, but in a clean, resilient fashion, is to put a stationary fuel cell. If you have existing natural gas, you have a biogas contract, you can use that for fueling, but you can also put that into a fuel cell that will create additional electricity at the site. That electricity could be used both for the EV charging and for the facility power. And natural gas is generally less interruptible than the utility electric grid. So it's a nice way to balance your fueling and your resiliency needs. Also, many of the fuel cells that could be done with a predictive cost, long-term contract for the PPA sort of arrangement. So that's the other part of all of this, is understanding what your costs are. Predictive costs is very important. So the next step is, after you've considered your fleet and your on-site generation capabilities, how to use a fuel cell, start considering what kind of vehicles are you going to be needing in the future. Is hydrogen a valid energy source? Hydrogen is clean, green hydrogen from electrolysis, zero emission through the entire supply chain. So it's very effective at lowering emissions. The cost of hydrogen currently is still quite high. So how can you maximize your use of hydrogen? So you can use it for fueling. Again, with stationary power, you can use hydrogen as a fuel for a fuel cell. That fuel cell can create electricity for your facility. It could create electricity for charging your vehicles, and it could be used for storing energy. So again, there's a long-term economic opportunity to have predictable cost of energy and have availability of energy as you need it, and as the technology evolves for the vehicles and as your needs of the facility change. So another thing to really consider again is, how does this all play together as a balance for your vehicle fueling, your facility needs, and also your over long-term cost of energy, and how do you do it in phases? So once you've considered a variety of diverse fuel needs, your on-site energy generation, your on-site energy storage, if you've done your process right and done planning, then you'll eventually get the utility power you need for expanding your electric fleet to where you need it. So then you've got the full energy infrastructure to support your operations, and in a way that's done with a manner that is very low emission, and you've got built-in resiliency all the way through, and also in a way that you can adjust to the changes of technology as they become available. So it's a scalable, modular, predictable cost process. One thing I mentioned before is the different business models. So every stage of this process, there's different business models. There's for the hydrogen generation, hydrogen transportation, hydrogen fueling, from the electric vehicle charging, what kind of arrangements do you have for solar? What kind of arrangements do you have for your batteries? What kind of arrangements do you have for your fuel cells? What's your utility rate? You can balance all of this in a way that you can predict your cost of electricity. So variety of models you can share locally with other entities, contract directly with finance firms, power purchase agreements, leases, a variety of different ways to achieve your goals with the right financing that meets your economic priorities. And why are we doing this? I mean, that's the real thing is, of course, we want to reduce emissions, but why do we want to reduce emissions? It's better for our health as a society. Reducing pollution is healthier people, lower healthcare costs. The socioeconomic benefits, all of this are great jobs, and that permeates through the entire education system, in high school, college, all of that. These are great jobs all through the supply chain with vehicle OEMs, infrastructure providers, engineering, construction. It's really good for society. And also geopolitically, this is something that's internationally, people can agree that these things are good for people. So to get our country in a leadership position with renewable energy, healthy society, great jobs, good education, this benefits us all. So again, thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to working with you to deploy your zero emission vehicles and facility power. Thank you.
Hey Randall, I'm always amazed by the energy depot concept. I think it's the future. I think we're going to see a lot of them going forward. Lots of resiliency built in there, and I could see it the future of transportation, especially around third-party logistics. So shout out to the audience now. If anyone wants to make a suggestion for future video topics, please let me know. You know where to contact me at fleets@pluginbc.ca. And also, if you're looking to take part of the CleanBC Go Electric Fleets program, please get in touch. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.